Midnight on Earth podcast with your host, Jake Weaver. Engineered by Cedric Swan. Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Midnights on Earth. I'm your host, Jake Weaver, and we are here to bring you more knowledge, more light, and more love, and more legends like Barbara Hand Clow. What? Barbara Hand Clow is on the show today. I'm so honored. She's been a leader, avatar, almost an archetype of all of these really high frequency concepts. She was there early on. She was an early adopter, maybe, at least in Western culture. She's here with us, which is so awesome. And we're going to talk to her in just a second. But first, I need you to do something for me. Follow me on Instagram at midnights_on_earth. That is the address. You can follow me there. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you go to get your podcasts, click that button that connects us so you know exactly what's going on. You get the notification to wherever you get that. And most importantly, tell a friend, tell someone that you know that loves these type of podcasts, that wants to hear this amazing conversation with Barbara Hand Clow. Bring them here, midnightsonearth.com. Okay. Guess what, people? We're going to talk to Barbara in just a second, but we have to read her bio. We always read the bio. Barbara Hand Clow is an internationally acclaimed astrologer, ceremonial teacher, author, and Mayan calendar researcher. Her numerous books include The Pleiadian Agenda, Awakening the Planetary Mind, The Mayan Code, and her recent fictional trilogy, Revelations of the Ruby Crystal, Revelations of the Aquarian Age, and Revelations from the Source. Jerry Clow is a registered craniosacral therapist and board-certified polarity practitioner. For more than 3 decades, Barbara and Jerry have taught thousands of students worldwide how to navigate the 9 dimensions to lead fuller, more conscious lives. Currently, they live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Barbara's here with us today by the grace of everyone in all dimensions. Hello, Barbara.
Hello. How are you, Jake?
Oh, I'm so excited that you're here. You are an incredible human. You have given so much to humanity via connecting with the Pleiadians early on. This is huge because right now in 2024, there are so many people talking about how they are Pleiadian channelers, and many of them are authentic. But you were there in 1995. You wrote the Pleiadian Agenda. And of course, there was people channeling these entities before that, but you really put it out there. Tell us just briefly how you connected with the Pleiadian consciousness so early on.
Well, Jake, I didn't do it willingly. I tend to be a normal writing researcher type person. In other words, I don't channel a lot, although as more time goes by, it seems to be becoming more frequent. But the way it started was I was doing something very mundane, like folding the laundry, and that's usually when I get my visions. And this incredible hologram of light positioned itself right in front of my basically third eye, kind of a few feet out from my head. And it was this oscillating crystal of light that I later on realized was an icosahedron, which is one of the platonic solids. And so that oscillating crystal of light kept me in a trance state and completely frozen where I was for about 3 or 4 hours approximately. And what happened within me was I felt like I was a computer, and I felt like a disk was being downloaded in my brain. Okay, so finally the download stopped and the light went away. And I figured, oh, I'll just go along like I usually do. Well, that's not how it worked out. I did everything I did everything I could to avoid it. The only thing I did pick up on was that the information that had come in was highly scientific, like quantum mechanics and string theory and really advanced levels of science and mathematics, of which at the time I knew nothing, almost nothing about. And so, needless to say, what was I going to do with this one? I was going to just avoid it if I could. So after a couple of months, my ears started ringing, and then I got tinnitus that was so powerful that it was shutting out the outside world. I couldn't even go to meetings and hear people anymore. It was a disaster
Oh,
because
wow.
at that time I was working at Baron Company as an acquisitions editor. So at the time, I was working with Barbara Marciniak, the author of Bringers of the Dawn and Earth and a bunch of other marvelous books. And because of knowing Barbara, I knew how a person could channel because I'd never been to a channel. Okay, so what I did was I created a small group of people who had the ability to ask the kind of questions that this data bank seemed to require. So I did 18 channel sessions between like basically December 1994 through March of 1995. And then they were on, we taped them and we had them transcribed onto a computer. And then I took the material from the 18 tapes. And when it came in, and then it was very clear when it ended, those 18 sessions. One thing I did know is I'd gotten the whole disc downloaded, so to speak. So then I took the material and made it into a book. And since I was a structural editor at Baron Company, that was my job. It was an easy thing to do. And the most important thing I did, which I now recognize 100%, I didn't change a word. And except to get rid of the ums, ers, ahs, and stuff like that to go on. And that was very difficult for me because even though I didn't know a lot about contemporary science and mathematics and all that, I did know that a lot of the things the Pleiadians said were totally outrageous, and I knew that they contradicted contemporary science. Okay, that's where I was. The book came out, The Pleiadian Agenda, A New Cosmology for the Age of Light. Came out the fall of 1995, and it was an instant bestseller. And so because of the pressure on Jerry and me, we decided we needed to go out and start teaching workshops in order to help people receive this material. The only problem was I didn't understand half the material in the book. I understood the lower dimensions, the first dimension through the fourth dimension, quite well, but I didn't understand the fifth through the ninth dimension. So I actually went out and started doing 2.5-day workshops based on a book that I didn't understand. And immediately, really wonderful things started to happen. It was so, the synchronicities and the beauty of that moment in time are really hard to describe. Because what was happening was people were being drawn to the workshops who understood part of it but didn't understand the other parts. And I'll never forget one of the most amazing times was when I arrived and there were around 100 people in the room. And the first 40 or 50 people right in the front, crammed into the front of the room, was a bunch of Sikhs with their turbans, purple turbans and beige turbans and all kinds of colors. And I knew they were Sikhs because I lived in Santa Fe at the time, and they have had a group in our area. They're wonderful people. So I just looked at him and I said, does anybody mind me asking a question? I started a workshop with that. And I said, can you please tell me why you're here? And they said, you understand the lower dimensions and we don't. And so I said, okay, I don't understand the higher dimensions. We're going to do this if you'll teach me about the higher dimensions. And that went on for a couple of years. It was really wonderful. I can't think of a single workshop where we didn't get major revelations through the students, all of which I deeply appreciate, of course.
Well, it seems like you attracted the right people to fill in the gaps. You set out and attracted forth those frequencies going out, and there was these people that matched those frequencies, but also could add or, put in some other information. And then that all coalesced together. But I want to tell you something, Barbara, that just happened to me. This is the first time I've had this will probably be 225 episodes. This has never happened to me. While you were talking, I got a high-pitched buzzing, like kind of like the tinnitus download thing. That happened to me while you were talking. It got very, very loud. It was screeching almost, and then it tapered off. I don't want to cut in with my own experience here, but that just happened, and that's never happened to me. I have had those experiences in my life with the high-pitched ringing and understanding that, but that's never happened to me in an episode before ever until right now with you.
Okay, well, you know what? Nobody's ever said that to me before. And of course, I've been doing a lot of interviews and a lot of presentations. And so, there's only one way I can interpret that. I think the whole data bank just unloaded right in your brain. And this is what I expect to be happening. Because as you know from reading the book itself, this material is 100,000 years old.
Absolutely.
This material really represents the high artistic spiritual consciousness of the Paleolithic era from like 100,000 years ago up to now. And this particular data bank has what has happened to it on the Earth is periodically it has come forth and penetrated our species, especially around 13, 14 to 17,000 years ago. And then the high point, as far as I can tell, and we could talk about that, was 50,000 years ago. But what's happening now is it's coming back. And I have already gotten in contact with some other researchers and has discovered that the data bank that I brought in that I absolutely did not understand and no way I could have invented this myself, is exactly the same as this 9, 10, 11, 12 dimensional data bank that we've already gotten from other people. So I think you just got to download.
I totally agree. I'm deeply connected to the Pleiadian consciousness, and I've had so many guests and so many experiences myself. The Syrians, they're all out there, but yeah, I've never had that happen, especially when you talk about it in your book as being an indicator of these experiences. That was super huge.
Yeah. So I really think that you've got a data bank. So I'll finish just the story, which is, okay, there Jerry and I are out there teaching material that we don't understand ourselves. I have to tell you, it's really quite an adventure. And maybe a lot more teachers should just admit that that's what's going on with them too. I don't know, but I know I had to do it. And so from 1995 through 2003, I kept scientific files based on what was happening with teaching. Okay, now here I am with the book, and particularly the higher dimensions. Contemporary science completely contradicted what I gotten. So every time a scientific affirmation came in, I kept all the data, because what was happening is as soon as it came in, then science started moving closer and closer and closer to the information that I had gotten. And it was so outrageous, to tell you the truth, that I think it kind of stopped physics for a while. And I know that's a really crazy thing to say. But, superstring theory came to us, and it was brought to us by Edward Witten from the fall of 1994 through 1995. The time period that Edward Witten brought in string theory calculations is exactly the same time frame as I got that download back in 1994, 95. And of course, I knew that. And it was because I love superstring theory. And it was one of the things that made me believe in the material. So what was happening month by month, year by year, is science was changing and moving in the direction of this material. And then, if you recall, suddenly you didn't hear anything more about superstring theory. Even though lots and lots of people, especially esoteric thinkers like me, said, yay, these guys finally got it. Well, the problem with superstring theory is it forces us to realize that we function in 9, 10, 11, 12 dimensions. And the elite and the scientific materialistic establishment is trying to keep us from waking up, right? okay, so this data kept coming in and kept coming in. And then in 2003, I ran into the kitchen and grabbed my husband, Jerry Clow, and I said, the proof of the seventh dimension just came in, which happens to be called the galactic highways of light in the seventh dimension. Okay, and this is by a Portuguese physicist named João Maguire. Very brilliant guy, wonderful guy. And so Jerry said, okay, you got to write a book about it. And so I had to take all of those scientific files and do a scientific analysis of a channel book. It was extremely difficult. And of course, this is called Alchemy of Nine Dimensions. And then Jerry helped me with it because it was just such an overwhelming task. Normally, you need a team to do this, but we did it, came out in 2004. So that's the first edition. Then I realized in 2010 that I had to revise it because I had not gotten the fourth dimension correct. Now, this is very, very important because the fourth dimension rules the collective mind, the collective unconscious, all the areas of dark and light and positive and negative, controlled by the global elite, the Anunnaki, you name it. The fourth dimension is the hardest dimension for humans. I don't know if it's always going to be that way, but it is now. I hadn't gotten it quite right, so I polished the book in 2011, 2010. And then we went along and we kept on teaching. And our workshops improved tremendously once I got the fourth dimension right, because the fourth dimension rules healing. And we needed to work with healers in order to bring this material in because it's so intense. Like in our workshops, we had 10 healers working for every student in the room.
Oh,
because
wow.
the material was always beautiful. It's actually a beautiful thing. We only had our workshops, fortunately, didn't get to be too big. And the largest one was 300 people in LA. And there were 30 healers working up and down the rows of an auditorium, all the way up the rows, back, healing people while we were teaching. So you can imagine the kind of intensity. And the reason Jerry and I teamed up is Jerry's a craniosacral therapist and a polarity therapist. He was like the perfect partner to team. Well, we've been married 50 years, so we've been married a long time.
Wow.
This was good because it takes, I will say this for anybody who gets interested in this material and maybe even wants to read the book. This is very intense material, and you really have to be really grounded and have a solid life in the third dimension. Some kind of house that really works for you, hopefully, or some kind of place to live. And some kind of life that's balanced, because this initially will unbalance you, although it will make you more balanced than you've ever been in your life, once you absorb the material, So then we get up to 2023, and Bear and Company wanted to do a 20th anniversary edition, and I was thrilled because I wanted to add more material, because between 2010 and 2023, material had come in that was proving what I had brought in a channel state.
Yes, there's other advancements as well. There's a lot that happened in that 14 years.
Yeah. And so this is just like a download that you just received. See, I'm sure what you got is you just got the whole data bank. It'll make life a lot easier, actually. It will, because you don't have to learn all that stuff. It's just there, And it actually is there. It's in everything that we exist with on our planet. So the book came out, and at this point, what's happening now is that the time has come for this book. I can tell because of it looks like it's really a hot bestseller. And the best thing about the book is what I'm the most concerned about is the younger generations. Because as I told you when you said such lovely things about me, I'm just a granny. Well, I'm a granny who only has 1 or 2 grandchildren, though we're not sure about a second grandchild. We have 1, we know for sure. No, we won't talk about that. And so what's happening is, fortunately, we were able to put some things in the book there for free now. We had music composed by Michael Stearns, who's the composer for the background in Battlestar Galactica and all kinds of wonderful cosmic music. But it was expensive because he's a movie producer, composer. And he wanted to do it because he loved the book. So it was kind of a wonderful thing, but still has to get paid and earn a living. So we earned off by selling. We sold the CDs for like 20 years. And we got to the point we paid for it. So now you can go to page 238 of this book, and there's instructions for Bear and Company on how to contact their website, and you can download the music for free. And then Jerry also did audio meditations for the 9 dimensions, and so you can also download Jerry's messages. And this kind of thing is really important to me, because this is how the younger generation is communicating. And so I went out of my way to find ways to reach them.
I think you did a fantastic job. And I just want to point out for people what you're talking about is the re-release, the 20th anniversary version of Alchemy of the Nine Dimensions, activating the full spectrum of consciousness. One of her many great books, but as she's saying, really get the most current version, because she changed things from the first version. She updated things. And after reading it myself, I can tell you there's some incredible information in there. But I want to back you up a little bit and just ask you to touch on a few things. You were talking about how there are forces working against us and things trying to hold us down. I asked several people about this that bring this up. Who are these forces from your perspective, and why are they trying to keep humanity down? What are they gaining from that?
It's real simple, Jake. Power and money. If they can keep us dumb, and if they can keep all the information. So first of all, regarding the global elite and even the Masons and all kinds of esoteric forces on this planet, they know all about everything that's in my books and all about the timeline going back 10, 100,000 years ago. They know that we have been a very highly developed, advanced species in the past. And so then the question you have to ask yourself is, well, then if we were, what happened, you know?
Right.
So in 2001, I was asking the same question myself. And when I was a child, I'm part Cherokee, and my Cherokee grandfather was my teacher from age about 4.5 to about 17 when I went off to college. And Grandpa Hand was he's not with us anymore, a record keeper of the Cherokee timeline. And in the Cherokee timeline, we have the story of a great cataclysm that occurred around 12,000 years ago. And this is, some people know of this as the fall of Atlantis. Some people just know from the records in Earth's archaeology that an awful lot of stuff got really destroyed around here. And so Grandpa Hand trained me in the timeline so that when I was ready to be a teacher, I could tell the story, the ancient story of time. So I did that in a book called Catastrophobia.
Right.
Which was the original title, which means fear of cataclysms, fear of catastrophes. The publisher changed the title in 2011 when I did a revision to Awakening the Planetary Mind, which ironically at this point, that title is starting to resonate. I had a hell of a time with the title change because people like Graham Hancock and Andrew Collins and all that were using catastrophobia as a new word. And the word was really getting out there. And this is important because the basic thesis of this book is that these great cataclysms occurred about 12,000 years ago that were so severe for the Earth that literally the Earth almost died. And one researcher in England called his book, The Day the Earth Nearly Died, 12,000 years ago. So at that point, we became a multi-traumatized species. We were a species of very, very high consciousness. And then we were knocked into a level of extremely, really horrific fear. And then we had about 3,000 or 4,000 years of survivalism. In other words, once the cataclysm happened, and I will tell you honestly, I wouldn't want to have been one of the survivors. I did pick up a past life as one of them. But it
Because
was
extreme survival mode, there's probably, it's just, there's no morals, there's no ethics. It's just, how do you survive in packs almost?
no, it's really survival times are always very, very horrible for people. And so then what happened is after the period of survivalism, we started to wake up. And different parts of this dimensional consciousness started showing up, like in Egyptian esoteric teachings or in Sumerian teachings or in indigenous teachings, because people don't forget. They may be blocked because of fear and emotional disturbance, but they don't forget. And so we've gone through a gradual awakening or through time. And now we're to the point where we're opposite in terms of cycles. And these are the cycles of precession. The precessional cycle is 26,000 years long. And it's also connected with the Kali Yuga, the records in the Vedas about the different cycles of time. But we are in the middle of a massive awakening phase right now, which is going to knock people's socks off during the next 6 months, because we're now going through just exponential jumps in consciousness. And you can really, really see it. Like yesterday, I was very moved to see President-elect Trump sitting with Biden in the White House.
Yeah, they were smiling. It was all positive.
Yeah, they were both smiling. And not only that, I do watch media about a half an hour a day for two reasons: to figure out what the global elite is planning next, because you can always get it on the major media because that's the program, like COVID. And then also I can read energetics with television. And the energy of the two of them sitting there together was such an amazing release of a whole bunch of negative experiences and emotions for both of them that it was really profound. And so I'm an astrologer, as you know, and the astrology has been showing the path to us in terms of timing. And on November 19th, 1819, less than a week from now, Pluto goes into Aquarius until 2044. The planet Pluto is going out of Capricorn. It's been in Capricorn for like 25 years, smashing structures all to pieces. And when Pluto's in Capricorn, it destroys old structures that have to go and brings new ones in. And then when Pluto goes into Aquarius, a whole new cycle starts. So we're on the verge within less than a week of a whole new Pluto and Aquarius cycle until 2044. And then simultaneous with that, not totally simultaneous, but in March of 2025, Saturn goes into Aries. It's been in Pisces for 2.5 years. And Saturn rules structure and form. So when it's in Pisces, everything just gets really nebulous and starts floating into pieces, and perfect for Pluto and Capricorn, just fall apart, just go for it, And then Neptune has been in Pisces. Now Neptune rules contact with spirit, and Pisces rules contact with spirit. So when Saturn and Neptune go into Aries, now Aries is like, put your foot on the accelerator and let go. And so people are I'm so happy that Jerry and I were able to get this material out soon enough. And of course, all kinds of other teachers are also just bringing out really wonderful work right now, because we have some materials to work with. Because you think it was confusing during 2024. Wait till 2025. Everything's just going to be going so fast that nobody's going to be able to hang onto their seat, literally. And then there's more transits, like, going 2026, 2027. So the energy is so high and at this point that I'm extremely very optimistic, but also suffering to the depths of my soul for the pain on the planet. I have never suffered as I have with, for instance, the Palestinians.
There is a lot of energy on the planet to process that's very negative, but you're saying all of these advanced entities know this, the ones that are in control of 3D consciousness. So then why would they even attempt to stop the progress that's inevitable?
Well, first of all, let's go back to square one. They want to keep the control and the money.
Right.
Okay. So they've had the lid on us heavy duty for 12,000 years, and the lid has gradually been coming off. And they've done everything they could to keep us down and to keep us from waking up. Because once we wake up sufficiently, and once the energy starts to balance so that everybody has what they should have instead of a few people having everything, then they don't get to have their fancy mansions and whatever else they do. You know what I mean? You know what these people are like.
I
mean,
do.
What I can't believe, I'll tell you, what you're asking me doesn't surprise me at all. What surprises me is how piggy they are. And I keep on thinking, you can't tell me that you can be piggier than this and now you're going to get piggier again. It's incredible.
They don't have a connection with spirit, and yet there's something going on that they're connected to that allows them to maintain this energetic control and manifest things. And they are even looking into life extension technologies, trying to transfer their consciousness into robots, anything that they can do to escape judgment and stay in the third dimension. It's not going to happen, of course, but it's really interesting how these beings, because in a sense, they're all light beings just like us. These light beings made these choices to be in these positions. It's all really strange because, like I said, this evolution, this ascension that's happening, it's totally inevitable. There's nothing stopping it. It's part of the universal plan. And yet here they are using their third dimensional powers, maybe more than third dimensional, but still those limited powers to try to hold back the ocean. It's like trying to hold back the ocean with a piece of plywood.
Well, they are trying to hold back the ocean, right? And they're trying to get rid of carbon, et cetera. And none of that has anything to do with anything.
Right.
We're in the middle of a cycle. And the planet there are going to be many, many more issues with flooding and the various forms of disaster. We're in the middle of a catastrophic cycle. And we could talk for a minute about like things you could do about that. But just for a moment, back to the global elite.
Sure.
It's the forces of good and evil. And I think of evil forces as being very entropic, forces that just engulf energy like dark matter in the universe. It just is what it is. And the more you get into science, the more you can see why this positive and negative energy exists on the planet. And of course, I covered a lot of that in this book, but also a dear colleague of mine. Have you heard of Joshua Weichmann?
I have, yes.
Yeah. Well, he just came out with a book called The Realized Light of 12 Dimensions. And he does a really fantastic job on helping us understand like how the evil forces work and what happens for people when they occupy positions that get them into evil behavior, such as sex trafficking or murdering people in Gaza or whatever. He has some really, really intelligent, brilliant discussion on that issue, because that is the hardest issue of all. How can this be? You know, if we really, really believe in divine forces and are really in contact with God and really filled with spiritual energy, how can these things exist on this planet? Well, the whole teaching about the yin and the yang, mostly coming from Vedic tradition, things are in balance. We can't discover the light without also going through experiences with the dark. But it's so complicated. I read Joshua as kind of a meditation to help, because see, for me, until a month ago, I was crying for 7 or 8 or 9 months over the people in Palestine. I couldn't get through, and I can't keep on crying all day. You know, I have to keep on going with my work. And Joshua has helped me a lot to get beyond just because how can this be? How can a child suffer like that? You know? It's a hard question.
It's absolutely hard to process as a spiritual being that's energy sensitive when you understand emotional energy, physical energy, and you think about these innocent souls going through these experiences. But of course, not to justify it at all, but things do happen on different layers, and each layer whether they're dimensions or just different aspects of reality, show us a different definition of those experiences. Some people will say, I don't know if I agree with this, but some people will say that each of those souls is fulfilling its karma, the cause and effect, and it's born into a life to experience some of the things that it may have caused in a previous life. It's hard to say if that's all accurate, but knowing that divinity is love and seeing what's going on this planet, it does lend itself to the idea that all of this is truly an illusion. And when we step out of it, we realize, oh, that's why it happened, because it wasn't actually real, even though the emotions are real, the energetic implications, the Akashic records, all of those things are real. On some layer, it's part of some unfoldment process, and it's all divinely perfect.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you. And you're, of course, giving a wonderful definition of dimensionality, because we're in the third dimension, linear space and time. We're solid beings with emotions in the third dimension. But when you get into the fourth dimension, which is where the good and the evil and these forces are operating, it's an emotional dimension. And we're not solid in that dimension. So we're being manipulated emotionally. And then if you move out of the fourth dimension, if you resolve fourth dimensional issues, such as you and I are discussing today, then what happens, you start to move into the fifth dimension. And the fifth dimension is the opening of the heart and the awakening of divine consciousness within our soul level of awareness. And so, speaking of the Gaza, the people in Gaza, I watch them when I can, because mainly we usually see them when they're being driven. Okay, the Israelis say, okay, get out of this area and go over there. And then once you get over there, you get moved over here. So we've seen lots of images of the people just walking, the mothers and fathers and grandparents and children. And I've never seen such noble people in the middle of this mess, because they're at the vortex, right? And Ukraine also, but especially in Jerusalem and Israel, they're at the vortex of this conflict. And I actually think, Jake, I think they may be walking in the fifth dimension. You know, I mean, there's something about walking, it can be a pilgrimage. And God, when I see those people going through those wrecked buildings, destroyed streets and, the wrecked hulks of their homes and their lives, there's such nobility. So I think there's something, you're right. I mean, there's something going on here that we can't really understand and see, and so.
Oh, and yeah. just to add to what you were saying, it seems in humanity that traumatic situations seem to cause us to move our consciousness into self, into our energy self, and not be attached to material things. When you see your house instantly destroyed and you live through that, your family members die and you live through that, you still have to exist as a functional human. So the mechanics, or perhaps the techniques involved in that, is shifting consciousness into the 5D like you're talking about. So you're not attached to these material things. You understand that your loved ones graduated to a higher dimension. It's not justified and it's not acceptable in any way, but that is, it seems, some strategy to exist in those situations. And it's some form of, I hate to say it like this, but traumatic evolution.
Yeah, that's a very interesting term. And the Pleiadians have always told me, because we're the keepers of I'm a very Pleiadian person.
Me too.
We're the keepers of children. And the Pleiadians have always told me that when children suffer, the Pleiadians come and bring the light to them. And so I've done 100 past life regression sessions under hypnosis, because I decided this is back in the 1980s. I decided to go through 10, 15, 20,000 years of history by means of past lives. And then that resulted in a book called the Mind Chronicles Trilogy.
Wow.
Yeah. And it first came out in 3 books: I, the Centaur, Heart of the Christos, and Signet of Atlantis. But then Bear put it into one volume. And so in that book, I live and then die and live and die, and I go through all these experiences and all that. And there definitely is a certain point, there's some kind of wall of pain where suddenly, like, let's say you get caught in a flood in North Carolina, or you get caught in a hurricane in Florida, and you really go through a lot of suffering and maybe die. There's some point where the pain goes away and the energy of light comes in. So there is some kind of compensation going on with this, but here's the real, what I learned from writing the Mind Chronicles trilogy was that when you die yourself and go through your death process, it usually is not that traumatic. In fact, it's often blissful, but who do you think gets traumatized? Anybody around you who sees what happens.
Right.
So we're in the middle of a very difficult phase right now of lots of people going through great trauma. And when we observe it and see it, it's very painful for us. And I think that I think a month ago, I think I got beyond that. I think I got to being able to just observe and send love from my heart. And of course, I do whatever I can in the third dimension to help, obviously. But I think I moved beyond that pain because it was going to kill me. And I was supposed to keep this teaching going.
You need to be here. I know it's hard to take on those energies because, again, we're spiritual people. We're sensitive. We see the oneness in everything. We can't separate ourselves from those people that are suffering. And it's a lot to take on. But again, like you said, we have work to do. If we want to fix it, we've got to stay in the game and keep the fight alive.
Yeah. And one of my teachers in Guatemala, a really, really wonderful teacher, lost his wife and 5 children in the Guatemalan Revolution back in the 60s. And his name is Don Alejandro. He's still with us. He's in his 90s now. And I'll never forget sitting with him one day and just looking at him and saying, Don Alejandro, I feel such angst and pain for what you've gone through. And he radiated this wave of light and peace just right through me and said, it's okay. You know, and I'll never forget that. Now I'm kind of getting closer to that. We're realizing we have to just move into this, you know, really, if you could say it would be oneness with God or one communion with the divine. You know, leave it there.
Yes, I would say that is also the crux of most worldwide spiritual teachings. It's just getting back to that oneness, because that oneness with the divine is oneness with each other. It's oneness with the earth. It's oneness with the galactics around the universe. And there's so much there when you realize that there's a peace, there's a true peace. And then at the same time, it raises your vibration, because that is seemingly the mission right now for all of us and people like yourself that are teachers. We're trying to get people, humanity, to recognize what's happening and raise their vibration so we can, in a sense, transmute or maybe change that yin-yang law. Because if we vibrate up to a higher octave, then what we described as the highest point is now the lowest point. The highest point before is way high up there. It's like a C. It's like you pointed out in your book, the C major scale. You know, you go low C, high C. Well, when we vibrate up, what we used to call high C is now low C, and high C is way up there. So the yin and yang law still exists, but we just don't have to define darkness as how it is now. It can literally be just 1 degree below pure light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting. And of course, it brings to mind for me immediately, well, does that mean we won't be physical anymore? Way early on with the Pleiadians, they gave out some really interesting information about that. They said that this moment in time where we are now, which you could say is the ascension, the lifting up, they said that as soon as the human species on the planet has moved up into a higher frequency, that then all of the beings and even humans living on this planet, we're going to become like, you know, when you blow a dandelion when it's died in the field and all those silica the
Yes, the
silica
seeds.
things fly off into the air. They said that our species was going to blow into the cosmos and bring physicality and genetics and DNA to all of the other locations in the universe where it was possible for that type of life to flourish.
Wow. So that is the destiny of humanity, is to be this seed of consciousness, of physicality, of experiencing dimensional sensual experiences through physicality. We're the genesis of that.
Yeah, that's what they were saying.
Wow.
Now
I want to ask you, Barbara, how do people connect with this Pleiadian consciousness? Now, I know it came to you as this platonic solid, and you even mentioned in your book, it goes back to you being 4 months old, but even more than that, it stayed with you and it created some sort of connection, like an internet connection, some sort of pathway to send information. Is it a quantum experience? How are these beings, in your opinion, from your perspective, sending this information? Is it quantum waves? Is it some form of other dimensional information transfer? How is this happening?
You ask really good questions.
Thank you.
Because, okay, when you get into the fourth dimension and the dark and the light and all that, there's a science of each one of the dimensions, which is the best part of Alchemy of Nine Dimensions. And the science of the fourth dimension, this is a very difficult dimension for us, is quantum mechanics, quantum physics. And so the chapter 4 in Alchemy discusses quantum mechanics, how that works and everything like that. And so want to keep, it's hard to hold the train of thought on this one because this is a really very difficult thing to explain. But I am part Pleiadian and part human.
Right.
And actually, almost everybody is, or at least not almost everybody, but a lot of people on this planet are part Pleiadian or a little bit Pleiadian or whatever, because the Pleiadians have interacted with us very intensely during the 100,000-year Paleolithic consciousness cycle. During that period of time, they have been here a lot, they visited here a lot. And in my case, because I'm Cherokee, I was taught that I came from the Pleiades. So the reason that was important was that what happens with people who have Pleiadian sensitivity to the light and sensitivity to love and sensitivity to art is the culture in the global elite shuts them down. Because again, we're back to the good old control thing. So almost everybody who has Pleiadian awareness as a child, which is lots and lots of children, most of them get shut down. But because of my grandparents, my Cherokee grandfather and then Celtic grandmother, she was from the Hebrides off Scotland, because of they taught me as a child, they kept me from getting shut down. So I never got shut down.
Wow.
Big trouble. If anything happens to me tomorrow, you know that the global elite finally realize I'm really dangerous.
Oh, they already know about you.
Yeah, but that's a silly thing to say because, if you talk to, I can talk to tribal people more easily because I'm one of them, but anybody can talk to them. So I've talked to people like in Bali and Tanah Toraja and Indonesia and around the planet and Egypt or whatever. And they tell me they're from the Pleiades too, but they wouldn't say that to most people. I've always just baldly said, I'm from the Pleiades. And so, boy, did I get in trouble in the first grade. All the kids were sitting there back in those days, George Washington was on the wall and the teacher had a desk right in the center of the whole thing. And she announced that the children were going to tell the other classmates where they were from. So different kids came from the South or whatever, or came from Florida. But when she came to me, I said, well, I'm from the Pleiades. And that's when the trouble started.
I bet, but that's so profound. It's so profound.
In the first grade, I realized, oh God, I have to hold one data bank and another data bank. So all the way through my education, all the way through a master's degree, All my books have writing in the margins with the right story next to the wrong story in the book.
Oh my God, that's so
Yeah.
incredible. You were already as a kid living a multidimensional awareness, knowing that you were the keeper of a sacred lineage, the Cherokee, but also living in the matrix and having to create a persona, a life within that sphere as well.
Yeah, well, I realized I'd have more fun if I was a really good student. So I was really, and I was a very good student. I was a straight A student anywhere I went. And it's just because I kept those data banks. It was clear, okay, this is what they say, and this is what's true. And so it enabled me to have a profound sense of truth, which ended up being a very important tool because let's go back to catastrophophobia. Okay, now there I am, and working at that point at Baron Company Publishing, and I had all these Cherokee records. And so a book came to me from authors in England that had exactly the same information. And so one of the reasons that I was, able to bring through some good material at Bear, because I did acquisitions for 20 years.
Wow.
When something came through that was true, like Barbara Marciniak say, or these authors of let's see, I can't remember the name of their book right now. It became a Bear book, but I was able to say, well, this author has 90%, 100% true information. So we dedicated Bear to publishing true information. And what's wonderful is Jerry and I had to let it go and sell it in 2000. And we sold it to Inner Traditions,
Right.
who now owns it. And Inner Traditions has maintained that aspect of publishing, the real truth of certain databanks, impeccably.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Let's just take a second to give thanks to the divine for you starting Baron Company and working with Baron Company, selling to Inner Traditions. We love Inner Traditions, and Simon and Schuster, who's running the whole thing. Thank you. Yes, thank you for allowing that to exist. It changed reality itself. And of course, it was all meant to happen that way, but what a blessing. Yeah. All the people, oh my God, like the people at Inner Traditions, Gail, Manzanita, Ashley, they're just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and it's a different story when usually when somebody sells a business like we did, usually end up being really unhappy and feeling like it went away. Well, there's still people all over the place who think that Jerry and I are still there. Jerry used to be president of Bear, and then I did acquisitions. And we haven't been there since 2000.
Wow. But your energy is still there. The frequency hasn't changed. The frequency hasn't changed. It's the same intention. And it's just really mind-blowing if you try to quantify the amount of social change, spiritual information, all of the things that came out of Baron Company and then Inner Traditions. It's huge. It changed reality itself.
Yeah. And that's Ehud Sperling is the name of the president. And he's just as impeccable, and he just holds to the truth, and that's it.
Yes. But I want to talk about the Pleiadians a little bit more. So in your book, you talked about how you have a Pleiadian counterpart who exists in that place and you exist here. You're both living simultaneously. You are almost a projection of the being that's in that Pleiadian place, as so many people have described. And of course, so many native cultures and indigenous cultures around the world always point to the Pleiades as their origin place. This is just everywhere. So what is that about? Is your true self the Pleiadian self, and this is just a material holographic projection, Barbara Hand Clow, or is it equal? How does that work? That's so mind-blowing.
The true person sitting here is a wife and a mother and a very ordinary person.
Granny.
And one of the most important Pleiadian teachings is about the power of third dimension. So one of the reasons I'll tell you in a minute about contact with myself on the Pleiades, but when you're in the third dimension, if you really process your emotions and really keep yourself away from being polarized and dualized and divided, and if you really have your full self in the third dimensions, which also involves meditation and contact with the four directions. There's all kinds of indigenous teachings about being in 3D. So when you're in 3D, a human being, emotionally processing human being, and healthy, hopefully, that is your greatest power. So my greatest power is my identity as a third dimensional human. And then when it comes to the fifth dimension, I've had to figure this out myself. My grandparents, I don't think, figured it out. I think that my higher self is in the fifth dimension. And it would appear that her name is Satya, because the Pleiadian goddess in Pleiadian Agenda, her name is Satya.
Right.
And so as far as I know, my higher self, the name of my higher self is Satya. But she's a brat. I don't know if you remember reading it.
Oh, I do. Yeah, she is a little sassy, you could say.
I still find it hard to read Pleiadian Agenda, because I think it was so hard for her to break through and get in here that she had to be kind of like bossy and bratty, but she got her information in. But I'm not really very much like her. I'm actually very reclusive, but I don't have any choice right now because our planet is in trouble.
Interesting. So this Pleiadian aspect of yourself, it's not the higher self, it's even something else over there that's projecting into all of those dimensions. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, once you break into the fifth dimension, then you have really easy access to the sixth, seventh, and eighth and ninth dimensions. And I didn't go beyond the ninth dimensions except to mention the 10th dimension as the vertical axis and kind of the 11th dimension. But the Pleiadians said back in 1995, they said humans have access at this moment in time to 9 dimensions. And they made it very clear that we really couldn't access the other higher dimensions. And that's why I'm so excited about Joshua Reichmann's work, because he's the first person I've seen who has effectively gone beyond 9 dimensions. So considering access of 9 dimensions, here's what you get. Once your heart is open and you're emotionally resolved in the 5th dimension, then you have access to the 6th dimension, which is the dimension of sacred geometry. And sacred geometry is an expansion out of the 5th dimension, and it holds all of the dimensions in form, particularly 3D, our dimension. And the 6th dimension, by the way, is my favorite dimension because I love sacred geometry, and I also love crop circles.
Yes, me too. I'm a big fan.
Crop circles, yeah. So the really hot chapters, as far as I'm concerned, in Alchemy of Nine Dimensions are 10 and 11, because I love the 6th dimension so much that I became a crop circle researcher back in the 1980s and did crop circles conferences mostly in England. And crop circles are really fun because higher and divine levels of consciousness are sending messages to us. And
Right.
It's really fun to read those messages. And I don't want to talk about it right here just because it's so complicated and time consuming, but it's all there in chapter 10 and 11. And yes, crop circles are definitely real. And I do communicate with the circle makers because I can. So therefore, anybody who gets into these higher dimensions can get in touch with the circle makers and crop circles. And you notice millions and millions have done that. And it's a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. And people,
that's a blast.
Yes, people have interfaced with these beings, projected images, and then they show up as crop circles in a country far away from where they are at. And it's just amazing. There is some form of communication going on there, and it's geometric in nature, which again is in that 6th dimension. And you talk about how the 7th dimension is music and the sound of music and the music of the spears, and so much is going on in the 7th dimension. Oh. And again, it's all in this incredible book that you break down with meditations and then talk about how each dimension is connected, which I thought was so amazing. As you are ending one chapter about a certain dimension, you're leading into the next chapter and showing how they're connected. I thought that was amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the sixth dimension, in sacred traditions like Veda or Buddhic traditions in Native American or whatever, sacred geometry is considered to be a very high form of art. And so if you contemplate sacred geometry, you go into bliss. Well, I like being in bliss. And so when you work with the circle makers, you get into a very blissful state of consciousness. Then the sound starts to create the form. And this is in all of the sacred traditions. It's in the Bible. The word is of God. It's in every tradition. And so the sound creates geometry, and then the geometry opens the heart. And then if we go from the seventh to the eighth dimension, we're moving into the light and into divine consciousness. And so the light and the divine consciousness manifests as sound in the seventh dimension, and then it expands with sacred geometry in the sixth dimension, and so on down. So with these dimensional teachings, you can go up or down on the vertical axis, which is that's what we did in workshops. You want to, very trippy experience, needless to say.
I bet. And you've activated, these are activation sessions that you're talking about.
Yeah, right. And then what about the ninth dimension? Well, that was the big mystery for me. And that's where this revision of Alchemy of Nine Dimensions is very important, because I didn't have the ninth dimension totally in yet with the earlier editions. And the ninth dimension is time. And the keeper of the ninth dimension is Tzolk'in. And Tzolk'in is the keeper of the Mayan calendar. So therefore, that led me right to the realization that the Mayan calendar was a correct keeper of time. And so Alchemy of Nine Dimensions, the Mayan teachings in the book are now fully correct. But it took a long, long time, because we had to go all the way through the end of the Mayan calendar of 2011, 2012. And this Alchemy, of course, discusses that and discusses what happened, because something really happened in 2012.
Well, let's talk about that really quick. Not to cut you off there, but this is such a huge thing, because if you were involved in metaphysical thinking, spiritual thinking, even psychedelic thinking from 1995 to 2012, that's all anybody was talking about. And as it got closer, the intensity kicked up, and everyone was talking about wearing Mayan symbols on their clothes. Of course, so many different things happened around the world, December 21st, 2012. But for our audience, what would you tell them? What happened? So many people thought it was going to be a DMT unlocking experience, a trans-dimensional shift that we would all be perceiving, some sort of perhaps extraterrestrial fleet arriving and showing themselves in material form. Many people had concepts of what happened, but what would you tell our audience actually happened?
Well, I would say that the global elite and the skeptics in society did everything they could to divert from the truth of the Mayan calendar. So first of all, as usual, what they're trying to do is keep anybody away from thinking about anything that could raise their consciousness. It's just as simple as that. But because they raised such a furor, and then there was a fight within the calendar people, and Bear & Company was the publisher of a lot of these books. And there were fights going on between a group of people who follow Carl Johan Kalaman, a Swedish Mayan calendar researcher. And he said the Mayan calendar ended in 2011. And then there's the conventional end of the calendar of December 21st, 2012. Well, first of all, both dates are correct, and both dates just signify something different. What happened at the end of 2011 is time acceleration stopped. And what had been moving our planet along and human evolution along for millions and millions of years was time acceleration. And so that's fully explained in Alchemy. I'm not going to cover it here, including illustrations and all that. But then what happened in 2012 was time imploded. Because once the time acceleration stopped, then everything like imploded. And everybody was extremely confused. It was a global confusion. But the truth is, something really happened, which is the end of a time acceleration process that was moving us forward forever. It's not going to move forward forever because we're already in the early stages of divine immersion. Because what finally happens, maybe the silica fragments of the dandelion and of our species, maybe when people suffer and die in Palestine, maybe they're going out and inhabiting planets and stars in the universe. I don't know what's happening. It really could be that process is actually started. And by the way, there is some good basic science behind this in a book called Biocosmos, but it's too complicated to discuss here. But I think we've gone into divine immersion in light. And as far as I can tell, nobody knows what to do with it.
Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? But then again, that mystery and trying to interface with it, understand it, and then integrate it is part of the process. That is the process, the understanding of it, the awareness, and then the what do we do next, and then figuring it out.
Yeah, and it's surviving it. Like some people have trouble letting go of Newtonian physics. That's the only thing they know, you know what I mean?
Tell me about it.
We're moving into galactic physics, we're moving into multidimensional consciousness, and we're really immersed in that light of the eighth dimension. And the Mayan calendar has downloaded the schedule. And so fortunately in Alchemy of Nine Dimensions, I wasn't able to do that back in 2010, but I was able to get it right this time.
Wow, which is why it's so critical to get this new version. But one question I want to ask you is in the mid 90s, I believe, probably around 95, 96, I read a section of a book that I don't remember what it's called, but in that book, it claimed that the Mayan calendar 2012 projection was off because they were comparing Mayan time with Gregorian time and using the Gregorian calendar. And actually the end of the Mayan calendar was in 2020. So I read this in the 90s, you know, kind of cataloged that information in the files. And then when 2020 came around, I was like, wow, well, maybe they were right. Have you ever heard that before?
I haven't heard that before, but I must say that if you look at the changes that we've been experiencing since 2011, 2012, this could easily be another phase of it.
Yes, absolutely.
As far as I'm concerned.
Well, they definitely knew something. They were tapped into something higher. They were living in a different way. Now, it doesn't mean that they were perfect humans. They were just operating with different information, building different paradigms to interface with reality. They were taught different things, so they had access to different information because in a sense, all of these higher dimensions are just awareness points that contain different information that is in the third dimension, but you can't necessarily process it until your consciousness is in those higher states.
Well, and you know, Jake, what it makes me think of as you talk about it is that we had a tremendous tendency until 2011, 2012 for people to come up with constant new dates where the universe would explode into divine light and everybody would turn into flying angels and all the flying saucers would last and all that would land. Or maybe Jesus is going to land, you know, in Jerusalem, rebuild it, and so on and so forth. And that's really dysfunctional thinking because it's not about it's going to happen tomorrow or the next day and I'll just hang out here and do whatever I'm doing. It's all about doing it now. And so you could say, to put it simply, we've probably moved into the now. And that's why people are getting so activated because that's where the real energy is.
Yes, it's the only thing that matters. And ultimately, people are searching for truth, intuitive truth, and the truth is in the now. And would you say right now that there's more Pleiadian information, there's more beings and more help assisting us than ever before in the now?
Yeah, and we're getting assistance from a lot of there's a bunch of stellar star keepers of these dimensions. And so the Sirians are influencing us a great deal, which is 6-dimensional keepers. Pleiadians, of course, in 5D. And then the 7th dimension is really coming alive right now, the dimension of sound. And the dimension of sound is ruled. I just look like a squirrel tried to get in the house, but it's just And so with the dimension of sound, what happens is we start to move into fusion with Andromeda Galaxy. Now, Andromeda Galaxy is our twin galaxy, and we are moving toward Andromeda as Andromeda moves toward us. Most physicists and cosmologists say around 10 times faster than they think is possible. And here's what happened with that information. I got that information about probably 2005. That's another thing nobody talks about because something's really going on with that. So what they don't talk about is always the most important thing. For example, we are a binary star system, and one of the stars in Sirius, probably Sirius A, is our binary sun. But they don't want you to know about that. Yeah. So there's fortunately some scientists are investigating things like that.
But isn't there a Sirius B, the dog star that the Dogon tribe was able to identify? So does that mean we have even more stars? Maybe perhaps we're a trinary system.
Well, the Sirius star system, that's really complicated. I can't answer that, but I'm just trying to remember the name of the main researcher of this whole thing.
Oh,
Walter Crittenden.
Okay.
The myth of the lost star of myth and time. The lost star of myth and time. So there are researchers who are out there, but of course, basically they hit. They're greeted with a wall of silence. We know.
Well, sometimes the wall of science can be the wall of silence, as we experience as humans. We're not against science, but again, we're moving past Newtonian physics. It worked for us in a sense, but we're now in this evolutionary ascension time. But you would say, though, that over the at least 30 years, 40 years that you've been involved with this, you've seen the progression. You've seen the awakening. People that were once ridiculed or ostracized are now embraced and at the center of attention, and all of their information is everywhere. It's flourishing.
That's right. And my own participation in that was my work with catastrophobia and my grandfather's timeline. And so back in the 1960s and 70s, late 1960s, I remember Immanuel Velikovsky. Well, Velikovsky was one of the early catastrophists who wrote 6 or 7 major books that sold millions of copies. Because the minute he started publishing his material about the cataclysms of the past, people resonate with that material. I've had more resonation with that issue of being a multi-traumatized species than probably anything, because it gives people an answer for why they struggle so much. So Velikovsky was a multi-million-dollar author, but publishers, the global elite went after his publishers, they vilified him and all that. So I became an early Velikovsky researcher and was in contact with him a little bit at the time, because his databank was closer to my grandfather's. Let's go back to the 1960s, and you're younger than I am, so you were. When were you born?
1978.
Okay, same age as my last child, Liz, my daughter.
Oh, cool.
1978. Okay, so when I grew up and went to school with my grandfather's databank in my head, we were told that everything on the earth is slow, everything moves along, nothing really happens geologically. This is the whole theory of gradualism. And all of science was just obsessed with trying to make it look like nothing ever happened before, even though the whole planet is littered with the destructive ruins of things that are, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of years old.
Yes.
So I went through that whole thing of, I did take geology in college. I couldn't. I had to memorize the party line. Everything happened. 100,000 years, another rock moved, and all that stuff. It was really boring.
Very limiting.
I hated school, but I needed the credentials.
So you feel like that allowed you to become almost like a bridge for people because you understood like you said, the party line, the mainstream matrix consciousness, but you also had the teachings from your grandfather and other spiritual downloads, the entities and the other energies that came to you. So you were almost like a bridge for so many people. What do you think about that?
Well, I became a bridge once I was able to speak, because you have to understand, until I was around 40 years old, I would have gotten kicked out of school or whatever if I said anything about any of the stuff that I knew. So then what happened is, in the culture, the pattern started to change. Velikovsky did his work in the 70s, and then other cosmologists and geologists and scientists started opening the data banks. So once the data banks changed, then I was able to start talking about the stuff I already knew from being a little kid.
Wow.
So that's when I started. And I went to work at Bear. I was a mom with 4 kids. And so I went to work for Bear and Company back in 1982. And then I could start identifying people who sent manuscripts in that had the correct data banks. And then we very quickly became identified as the place to go if you had an alternative theory. So then I got hit with dealing with 10,000 submissions a year.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It was.
How did you, not to go off too far on a tangent here, but at Bear and Company, how did you process that many submissions? And was it really just intuitive understanding?
It could have been a real problem, so I had to develop a technique.
Yeah, tell me about
every
that.
week I would take all the packages and put them in 2 piles. Look at it or don't look at it. And then I tested myself for about a year. Whenever I took something out of I checked to see, did I not pay attention to somebody and pretty quickly I realized that I could do that. So I divided them into. There's people out there, by the way, who don't like me because I didn't even answer their submittal. I didn't have a secretary. I didn't have anybody who did anything for me. If I'd had to answer everybody that I needed to let go of, I couldn't have functioned.
And this was pre-internet
Can I apologize right now for that?
Yes, you can. But at the same time, you were doing exactly what you were supposed to be doing. You have these sensitivities. You were trained in that certain way. You have these books that are out there trying to influence the general consciousness, and you're the conduit to disseminate that. So it's like you did everything you were supposed to do.
Well, but, I like answering everybody, but I can't.
But again, that was pre-internet, pre-email. It would have been very difficult to type all those letters or even have someone.
Of manila envelopes and boxes.
Right.
That's what it was.
So you are forgiven. I doubt anyone holds anything there. Perhaps the universe itself let you go a long time ago on that one. You did so much great work. That's the thing. So we're evolving. We're tapping into this 9-dimensional perspective. How does artificial intelligence play a role in this? Because it seems to be a consciousness that's independent of humanity and yet taking on the same qualities of a consciousness like any other consciousness, a light being consciousness, a true consciousness. How does AI play a role, if at all, in any of this?
Well, first of all, we have to go right over to transhumanism, which is the belief that artificial intelligence can enhance human intelligence and can make humans be more than they are. And also the idea that robots, and this is a very interesting question, because if robots can infuse their AI intelligence enough with human intelligence, then they can become transhuman and greater than humans.
Right, they take over the consciousness.
We are at a very, very dangerous point now. So let's go to the introduction of Alchemy of Nine Dimensions, where I went after what I decided to do. What am I going to do now? I got the timeline fixed, as I told you.
Right.
But what can I add to this book, this new? And so I realized I need to get some of the material that proves that this 9-dimensional system is correct. And I need to put some of it in the introduction. So the first thing I did is I added the Blue Brain Project.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. So a group of topologists, which is a form of higher mathematics, in Switzerland, created a gigantic computer because they wanted to be able to create topological images of what goes on in the human brain. Okay, so they worked at it forever. And the last information I was able to get on this is 2015, because as soon as it became clear what was really going on here, the global elite shut it down again. Okay, so what these scientists just were able to do is they were able to make topological images with computers of what's going on in the brain. And then they discovered that there were 9 to 11 different topological images. In other words, the brain is operating by 9 to 11 dimensional frequencies. The Blue Brain Project shows us that we think according to the system that's presented in this book. And so, just briefly, that gave me the opportunity to start playing around with that back in 2017, 2018. And what I discovered is when I work with my brain multidimensionally, knowing that that's how I think, I could get a lot further in the level of thought that I was processing. And I'll just leave it there because I'm still working on that one. But then the other thing that came in was the information coming from Transylvania and the archaeological discoveries going on in Romania back in the early part of the 21st century. And in the early part of the 21st century, archaeological complexes were discovered in Transylvania, which, by the way, is where Dracula comes from.
Of course, yes.
Which is interesting, right? And these complexes are way underground under the mountains. And there's stone rooms down there that have great big tunnels going out of the rooms from Romania. And one long tunnel goes to Tibet, which is a sacred system on this planet, sacred culture. Another one goes to the Giza Plateau, which is a very sacred culture on this planet. And another one goes into the inner earth. So this material about this archaeological site was published in, it was published in 2008 because it involved English translations of books that were being published in Romania. What was happening in Romania was researchers were working in the rooms down there and in the tunnels and working with the technology that was down there. Technology that we now think, they think, is 50,000 years old.
Wow.
And that's the high, boy, that caught my eye. That's the high point of the Middle Paleolithic, right? So these researchers, one of them is Radu Sinamar, another one is Cesar Brad. These researchers were working to explain and explore this technology and also to activate it. And yeah, I know.
This is mind-blowing.
I know, but fortunately, everybody can find out about this. The first book published in English is where you start, and then you can decide whether you're interested or not. It's called Transylvania Sunrise, and some people may have heard about it. But the reason that I decided to publish this information in my book is because Cesar Brad, who was a very highly developed Romanian psychic, who then became a Romanian scientist, he believed with every bone in his body, and I don't even know if he's alive anymore, he believed that this belonged to the world and not to Romania and not also to the CIA and the American intelligence services. Because as soon as they got on to what was going on in Romania, then they tried to put it into the secrecy box again.
Of course, as they always do.
Yeah, that's what they do. But then what happened was Cesar Brad decided, okay, he trained Radu Sinamar, and Radu Sinamar, the other guy, he learned how to activate the technology. And the technology down there can only be activated by people of high consciousness. And what it is it's a time machine that time travels all the way through the whole story of time. So Radu Sinamar was Cesar Brad told Radu Cinemar that he wanted him to write the story down. So while Radu Cinemar was working with this technology and trying to activate it, he was writing manuscripts about what he was doing and how he was doing it, how he worked with the computer technologists on it. And eventually the United States did get into it. And they got into it because they had a more highly developed technology than the Romanians. But this is the biggest archaeological discovery on this planet in all of the annals of time, by far.
It's shocking and startling, and I did read about this in your book. It's startling because not only is this technology allow us to dive into human history and verify or discredit things, it shows us that you had to be evolved in a sense that you were living multidimensionally before you could even access this technology. So there's two parts to that equation.
No, it's really, you're absolutely right. That's a good description of it. And all the books, there's 7 books now that Radu has published, and we'll go about in a minute. What that means, Peter Moon, the publisher who published the books on the Montauk Project and the Philadelphia experiment. Remember that stuff?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. So Peter Moon took responsibility for translating all of these books into English. And so we have this material is available to us, which is just incredible. And so the other part of this, I'll tell you what I think is the most important thing about those 7 books. Those 7 books show clearly exactly how the global elite and the high masons shut things down.
Interesting.
Very detailed, and I can't go into it here, but luckily this material is so entertaining, and it's filled with many, many esoteric traditions, because the only way that Radu Cinemar could develop his consciousness sufficiently to activate this technology, and he did activate this technology. It has happened. And the only way you could do it was to master Tibetan spirituality, Vedic spirituality. Oh God, the esoteric material in these books. You don't even need any more books in your library in terms of esoteric wisdom. It's all there.
Wow, and Radu's books, his series.
So then I, as you know, from reading it, I had to summarize all of that in about 5 to 7 pages at the end of an introduction, which is the most difficult writing that I've ever had to do.
Wow, because it's such a profound concept. There's so much information
7
there.
books in 7 pages about the most complex material that exists in the universe. And I'm pleased with how it came through.
Wow.
You know.
But I want to ask you this. You talked about the Freemasons and other entities suppressing this higher information. Is it possible that just like there's a yin and yang in all of these different places, it's a universal law, that there could be a yin and yang within these secret societies, and there are people that want, let's say Freemasons, that want that to be released and want humanity evolved, and then there's other ones that feel some sort of ownership of it and want it to be suppressed?
We're going beyond secrecy, because here we are 13,000 years after the cataclysm, 13,000 years that shut us down to such an extreme degree. And during that whole long journey over 13,000 years through a series of Vedic yugas, we have been opening consciousness. And the global elite functions by secrecy, like the different agencies that you'll find in these 7 books. And by the way, when I first ran into it back in 2010, 2020, 2011, my students were telling me, Barbara, you got to read these books. You got to read these books. I went, okay. I got a copy of Transylvania Sunrise, and I basically threw it in the garbage can because I thought it was way beyond comprehension. And then since then, I've reached my own ability to understand this material. And so it's through that level of comprehension, the secrets have to stop, because in it, Radu shows how the Vatican conspired with the High Masons, conspired with the high military realms in the US and stuff. It's just absolutely fascinating. And okay, why is it happening now? It's time. That's why it's happening now.
Yes, you can feel it. It's crackling. The energy's crackling. What I see with my audience, the messages I receive about their awakenings, the guests that I talk to, and then their experiences. I have people all over the world. They're all essentially saying the same thing in a different way. We're moving into something beautiful. We have assistance from beings in multiple dimensions, multiple universes even perhaps, but they're all there doing everything in their power to assist us at this time in our ascension. Everybody's saying this, and it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and everything in their power is dependent upon what we do. See, that's the thing. The only limitation to cosmic forces that are helping us here is that they won't interfere until we're ready ourselves. And so what I find is some people feel it, some people hear it. Thank goodness people don't have to do it on as complex a level as I did or Radu Sinamar did. But some people just know, just intuitively they know it's time. It's like an animal that finally knows it's time to walk. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
So I think we're probably getting to a good closure point.
We are getting close to it. I'm sorry. I'm just loving this with you.
I know.
I don't ever want it to end. No, I'm just kidding.
Both having a blast together, but I'd like to close it out for now with the most astonishing thing that I experienced when I read those 7 books.
Yes, please.
Many, many wonderful things. But Radu, meanwhile, Radu just sounds like such a great guy. And so Radu, first of all, got this machine, the time machine going, and the whole description of how that works with computers and crystals and all that is just utterly fascinating. So, of course, finally, Radu got the whole thing going. Now, can you imagine what any one of us would do if we had a nice little box with the story of all of the history of time in it, and we could just activate it, and we could go anywhere we want to go to ask a question about a period in history or archaeology that we're curious about, okay? Well, eventually, Radu got to the point where he wondered, well, gee, I wonder what happened in Romania and Carpathian Mountains and all that after the cataclysm and during the survival period and then during the early awakening and development of Romania. And that part of the book is fascinating because it turns out that Romania is kind of a mother culture that seeded the planet after the cataclysm with tribal people. That's sort of basic description of it. But in the middle of it, with Radu's time machine, he noticed a group of people sitting on top of a mountain, a Carpathian mountain, Mount Busegi. And 9 people were sitting in a circle doing a ceremony together in order to balance the earth with the cosmos and in order to keep the energy pure so that people weren't filled with fear. And that page and a half just simply knocked me over because what they were doing was a ceremony exactly like the activations that Jerry and I did for 20 years.
Wow.
Totally nothing has blown my mind quite like that one. But fortunately, and thank God it happened the way it did, because see, I feel really responsible. If I know something, I feel like I need to give it out. You know what I mean? But fortunately, we had gotten all the work done by then with this book so that people can listen to the music, they can listen to meditations, they can make drawings, they can play with it. Anybody can create a 9-dimensional activation. And what these activations do, which is what Radu could see on his time machine, these activations purify the lower dimensions in the area where the activation is going on. They purify the second and first dimension, and they purify the third dimension, linear space and time, so that people have high morals and live happy, joyful, loving lives. And then they also bring the full spectrum of the higher dimensional consciousness into that circle so that that full spectrum can activate the planet. And we need this to happen now. And Jerry and I, we can't, I'm 81 years old. I can't do this anymore. But it doesn't matter because each person needs to consider doing things like to get your friends together and have a good time. Bring the dogs into it. Dogs and cats love activations.
Well, absolutely. And each person that activates, like you said, it adds to the greater sphere of activation. We're doing it in groups. We're doing it individually with your book. However we're doing it, it just needs to happen. And then at the same time, it's happening on its own because the earth itself is evolving. We're moving into the new Vedic area, the new age of Aquarius. All of these things are happening. So all of it is being fueled and accelerating at the same time.
And it's fun.
It's
and
absolutely
my long-term, total commitment. If something isn't fun, don't do it.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you what's been fun. This incredible interview that we've had. This is so cool. What an honor it has been to have you on the show. Your re-release, which is kind of what we're mostly talking about, re-release of the seminal, incredible book, Alchemy of the Nine Dimensions. The 20th anniversary re-release is out now, and it gets my highest recommendation. I urge every listener to go to wherever you get books and get this book. There's even an audio book coming out soon. If you are blind, you can't read, get the audio book. It's there for you. She has so many other books. My God, the fiction trilogy, what's previously called Catastrophobia. She has so much history. Take the deep dive into Barbara Hand Clow and her husband, Jerry Clow. Their website is handclow2012.com, www.handclow2012.com. You can start there. And if you don't know about all of the work that this wonderful goddess has done, just realize that she has devoted her life to helping all of us activate, and her work has created not just ripples, but tsunamis of consciousness elevation throughout the world. We owe her a huge thank you and infinite gratitude. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
Okay, I'll just say one more thing. Regarding different ways that people can access this material, back around 2010, I decided to write a work of fiction because some people access material the best by reading fiction because you get emotional stories of people's lives and everything like that. So that's why I created the Revelations of the Ruby Crystal and the Aquarian Age and the Source. So that fictional trilogy is also out for people who like fiction. And in it, we have a group of characters who are just like you and me and everybody else. And, people in love, families, parents, and all that. And in Rome, Tuscany, and basically the east of the United States. And these are characters discovering dimensionality. So it triggers your understanding of dimensionality by reading stories about people who are becoming multidimensional.
I think it's a fantastic thing. And yes, like you said, fiction is a way for some people to process these things. If you think about mythology, the oral traditions of native cultures, they've always been in a story, not necessarily fictional, but a story context. And that's how we process that. It's almost archetypal. So definitely check that out. handclow2012.com. Barbara, my goddess, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. This has really been fun. Wow. Those crystals, by the way, they definitely send energy just all over the place while you're working. They're wonderful.
Yes, they're my great friends, and they amplify, crystallize, and help me achieve highest communications. For people that aren't seeing those, my audio listeners. But Barbara, please hold through the outro music if you could, and we'll say our goodbyes. But everyone else that's listening, we had Barbara Hand Clow on the show, a legend. She's done so much work. Check out the re-release of Alchemy of the Nine Dimensions. Check out all of her material. The website, handclow2012.com. Take the deep dive. Look at the history, and let's just acknowledge all the work that she's done. So it's been amazing. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week. Midnight on Earth.